Hello, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me on another weekly worm update. I am starting with one of my regular tote bins that does just finish the harvest doing a horizontal migration. I haven't added any additional material yet, but over the next couple of weeks I will be adding more material to this bin to get it up to the level that I like for it to be before it composts down. My regular totes that I use, if you're new to the channel, I don't do a double bin system, nor do I put any holes in the bottom or around the sides of my bin. I'm in South Jersey and I tend to have a lot of humidity where I am. So when I put any type of lids on my bins, I note that they hold so much more water in these regular totes. I have customized my system to just be mosquito screen and bubble wrap to kind of combat the moisture levels that I have in my bins. So you won't see me actually put a lid on any of my bins. But this week was just about maintaining this bin as it had just finished the migration. Everything looks really good and I set it up for the next week. On the second regular bin I have, I'm trying to do what's considered a trash can style. You're not really supposed to mess with it too much, and I probably should have started with a little bit smaller material amount or maybe even put the worms into a different bin because it seems like it's very hard to encourage the worms to migrate out of the material. Last week, it seemed like none of the worms had really left. This week, a good majority of the worms had gotten out of the finished casting, so I was able to remove about half of the castings from that side. And I will not take them all because once I got to a certain level, I started seeing little worm tails. So what I did was took the material that was closest to the cardboard and I moved it back and then moved the cardboard over, making it a little less distance for the worms to have to travel to get into the newer material. I found that worms really enjoy uh, feeding off of the banana peels. So I have a good amount of banana peels that I was given that I froze that I'm going to put in here to encourage the little guys to move over. If next week I don't see them moving, I'm going to try to feed closer. I did feed kind of in the corner, and that might have been the issue. And I think I fed in the previous week in the corner. But this week I did keep it to that same corner. So we'll see what happens next week with the worms. I hope I can completely harvest all of the material next week. But if not, I'll just work on what I need to do next. This is kind of an experiment for me. I've never tried the trash can style. Trash can style really means you just uh, dump larger chunks of things in there and just leave them alone. Don't really do much to it. So we'll see how this works out. And I also did add a bit more cardboard to this at the end. That's another thing I'm trying to figure out and tweak how to add the cardboard, whether I just want to do dry cardboard, wet it down, and then what's the best way to wet this down. I'm glad I have a multitude of cardboard, and when you're doing vermicomposting, having a cheap shredder and an abundance of cardboard is key. That keeps my costs down because I just use the cardboard from things that I get shipped to the house. But otherwise, as I mentioned before, didn't do too much to this, just gave it its food, set it up, and hoping for a completion of the harvest next week. For the first of the regular totes, this is also going through a migration. And again, doing the horizontal migration in vermi-bag totes is very tough, at least for me, because they dry out so quickly. The bags themselves are meant to allow for the air to flow through the castings and through the material completely. And for something like a harvest where you need to have both sides be well moistened, I'm finding that keeping the moisture in this bin is tough. I still haven't made a decision on whether I'm going to do a bait tray the next time. I am still a little scared because I did lose a whole colony, and that's why I'm rebuilding the bag with the other vermi bag tote. But I push the material all to one side and spread out the cardboard. I think I might put some cocoa core and cardboard together next week in this to see if that encourages any moisture retention. But I still have quite a bit of worms in those castings, so I'm not going to take any off of this bag. I'm just going to put food that I know attracts the worms on the side that I'm going to feed and add the grit, and hopefully next week I'll see more of the worms having moved to the new bedding side. They still are hanging out in that other side. The last of my bin style totes is another Vermi bag tote, and this is the tote that has been receiving all of the castings, the cocoons, the juvenile worms from the breeder bin. I'm going to have to figure out what I need to do in this bin quickly because the material is very silty and it's becoming quite muddy towards the bottom especially. So I don't do much in this bin right now as I don't want to fiddle with it, but for sure in the upcoming weeks I'll have to do a mock harvest, one where I'm not really taking the castings out but where I add more cardboard because this bin is full and I need to take some material out of it. So I didn't do much to this as usual, just fed it up, gave it its grit, and set it up for the next week. My last system is my flow through system, the Vermi Bag Mini. And I expected this to be quite dry this week since I did add some shredded cardboard to the top of this. I added a double layer of shredded cardboard. I am happy to see worms have come through the cardboard and they've definitely moved up to the next level. But of course, when I add more shredded cardboard, I get those crispy edges. So I'm just mixing up the edges with the center, which stays very well hydrated, and encouraging moisture by adding cantaloupe, something that has a lot of moisture in it, onto the edges of the bin. One good thing about the flow through system is that any water, I should say, that comes off of the bags from being in the freezer once it defrosts, I can pour that into the Vermi Bag Mini and not worry about too much leachate in how I run my system. So I did pour the liquid off of that into the middle as well. I probably should have put it around the edges, but I just put it in the middle of the bag. And I am going to add additional moisture to this as well. I had a pretty good balance going on with the moisture content before I added the cardboard, but with the flow through system, since you're always adding layer after layer each week, especially if you're in an area like mine where the bag does dry out quickly, you are going to have to figure out how to maintain those moisture levels on the edges. A lot of people have commented how they've become very creative in how they do it, but for me, I found that just feeding to the outside tends to help out a lot with those moisture levels. I think when I harvest or get to the time where I'm going to start harvesting or doing the final harvest on the Vermi Bag Tote, I'm also going to do the Vermi Bag Mini, but this guy was set up for the next week as well. Last but not least, just moving over to my breeder bin, which I have seriously downsized. I just dug through to make sure the worms were still in there happy and healthy, and you just saw a worm tail, a couple of worms coming up to the surface. They were under the cantaloupe, and since that really hadn't gotten broken down, I didn't do much to this bin either this week. Just made sure the food was closer to the top and moistened the cardboard a little bit. I will be sifting this as well soon, so I've got a lot of projects to do with the worms. That concludes my update for this week. Thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.